Welcome to another episode of Iconic Freedom, the Formula. We are setting the standard for accountability and responsibility, the ownership of your choices and the consequences for those choices. Let each care for self, and all will be cared for.
Look at three people around you right now. Just a quick glance. Pick three in your mind, okay? Now, in your mind, without telling them, who's the person out of the three that you like the least? Ask yourself, why do you like that person the least? And it doesn't even have to make sense. It could be like, well, their face and their smug look. They probably come from a privileged family. They think they're better than me, blah, blah, blah. They remind me of my high school bully. Like, the whole story comes out. And halfway through the event, I pause. I'm like, okay, look at your group. Remind yourself of that first exercise, what you thought of that person versus now that you know them better. Was your perception accurate, yes or no? 99% of the time is completely off. And then you realize, wow, all that came from me projecting onto them. I knew nothing about it.
So that is a really fun clip. I really like the idea of this understanding of when we have something unresolved in us. I actually was having a conversation with my friends, and it's what kind of, sparked the idea for this particular podcast, because it's about a person not having resolved something from their past. It's not all the psychology gobbledygook that people want to talk about. It's not that. And people want to get too much into their emotions and, oh, you reminded me of this and that's why I feel. It's like, yeah. It's that you haven't addressed something and you've not. How do I say this? This is probably the better way to say it. It's not about sitting there and indulging in all of your emotions and then trying to get other people to take care of your emotions. That's actually in opposition of you creating your own formula of integrity and character forged through responsibility of choice and accountability for the outcome. What is actually happening is that you have not developed the skill to be responsible for everything or the expectations that you've placed on life, which, you've attached yourself to, and not feeling like you could control everything in your environment. So, you kind of freak out not having developed responsibility, and it creates an overreaction. So then what happens is somebody might trigger something in you, but what winds up happening is that instead of you looking at yourself and saying, okay, what is that all about? What is it that triggered in me that I needed to respond in that way? Because, again, you haven't developed the skill to be responsible for all of your choices. And I will tell you, this takes time, because you have to conscientiously make a choice, watch the outcome, and own the outcome. And you have to be able to do that with everything that you do in life. The fact that I'm sitting here right now and I'm talking to you in my hotel room and I'm moving my hands and I'm saying the words that I'm saying, I own all of this. I own my environment. I own everything that led to this moment in time that I'm sitting here talking to you on this podcast. And I think I've talked about this a couple of times over the last couple of years, that I actually went through the experience and the exercise of dissecting everything that I was doing for my own self-interest. If I got up out of the chair and I went into the kitchen, I asked myself, what is my motivation? And it's like, okay, well, if the motivation is I'm hungry, okay, then what is that motivation? I'm hungry, so now what? Well, now I want to satisfy that hunger. And how am I going to do that? I'm going to eat something. Great. And what is it that I'm choosing to eat? I mean, it's tedious, right? I mean, the minutia of it. But what it did for me was, over time, it helped to move me to a place where now I don't think about it in terms of, what's my motivation for doing that? What was my self-interest? I already know that I own the experience. Once you automatically move through experiences because you've developed responsibility, it appears easier. And once you learn this, then you just do it. And I've said this actually once or twice to a couple of people, but it's like, try it 100 times and then we'll talk. Because a lot of people will say, oh, well, I do that. It's like, no, you don't. And how do I know that you don't? Because of what just came out of your mouth. Because of the choices that you're making in your life. It's not like I have some sort of, crystal ball, or I read palms, or, tarot cards. I listen, I hear, and I observe. And that's how I know what's going on. If you are a person that is not accepting responsibility and you're not owning your choices and the outcome of those choices, it comes through in the language that you use. Now, what's interesting is that some people will try to scam this, right? And I've seen this over the years, is that I will talk to people, people that I've worked with before, or that, I've been their supervisor, and they will attempt to scam it by trying to mimic what I'm saying. But the problem is that you haven't integrated it, so it's not going to work. I mean, it's like, sure, it's a formula, and it's a formula that works if you do it. But if you don't, and you don't integrate it, and it isn't becoming a part of you, then you just mimicking it is you just mimicking it. It's not doing anything. You lack the knowledge and the cognitive comprehension, and you then use emotion as manipulation because you lack integrity, right? So you go through this whole shenanigans where you're trying to fake it. And people try to say, oh, well, fake it till you make it. No. That's not how this works. The thing is that if you keep trying to fake something rather than genuinely walk through the process, you'll never get to where it is that you want to go, because you'll always fall short of whatever the goal is that you and the desire that you put out to the universe. This is what I want. This is what I want to do. And now I will make choices that I will be responsible to those choices, and I will be accountable for the outcome, which means whatever the outcome is, I have developed enough within myself that I trust myself to handle it, whatever it is. If I broke something, then I will pay for it. If I said something, then I will, reevaluate. I will self-evaluate and I will self-correct. I mean, that's how it works. Now, what's interesting about that is if people are doing things where they're making really big choices in life and they're not being self-evaluative in their choices, they'll make a choice and then this massive outcome happens and they're like, wait, what the hell happened? It's like, well, what the hell happened was you made a choice. You made a choice to do such and such. I just read on that Neighborhood app last night that this mother is lamenting about her 18-year-old who's now going to college and who signed some agreement with one of these fitness centers. And, apparently when they read the contract, it's all over the place, and the kid's winding up paying like $700 or something for this contract. Well, that's a parent who didn't do a good job of teaching her child how to read a contract, how to be comfortable enough to say, I need to check with my parents about this, or I want to check this out with somebody before I just sign it, or I want to think about this a little bit. Never taught that person how to do that. And so she lacks responsibility and accountability, and the fact that she's on this app and she's lamenting to all these people on social media about her ineptness already tells you, right, who she is. But now she has conveyed that to her child. Now she has infused that into her child because her child goes into a situation and is not conscientiously making choices. He goes in and it sounds all exciting and he gets, all revved up and he signs a contract before he realizes what the contract says. So this is but a small example of how this happens. What happens when people go into a job? What happens when they get married? What happens when they buy a house or they buy a business or they get on a plane? Or it's all of these things that you have to look at, be conscientious about your choices, and be able to realize, what am I dealing with and what am I ignoring? Now, circle back to all of this other stuff. So what does this have to do with projection? Well, if you don't resolve these things, you see how these things can pile up very quickly. If you don't resolve these things, then what happens is you lack skill in being able to manage your life. And so then you see people outside of you as the problem. You're looking at that individual in front of you as, you're the reason for my unhappiness. Or, whatever I'm going through is because of you. No, life is because of you. You made a choice. Life is not happening to you. Life is happening because of you. And if you are attempting to project your problems or your unhappiness onto another person, well, you're not taking ownership. And when you do that, for a person like me and others like me, we immediately look at that and go, oh, you have no integrity. Because the first thing that comes out of your mouth is that you're blaming somebody else. I think one of the examples that happens pretty quickly right nowadays is politics, right? We talk a lot about that, but when people are freaking out about choices that the president or the vice president or different politicians are making, and they're attacking that person in a sense, they're going after that person and freaking out and making all kinds of statements and allegations and accusations, when the reality is that you have not developed responsibility in you. If you had developed responsibility of choice and accountability for outcome, you would not be looking at another person. And basically what I've said in the past is, listen, sweep off your own front porch before you start worrying about everybody else. But you won't be able to recognize what responsibility and accountability looks like in life if you don't develop it. It's like you can't walk down the street and say, oh, that person's being responsible and accountable. Well, how do you know? Well, you know because you've developed it and you know what it looks like. You're not sitting there blaming other people, lamenting about other people, trying to project your problems onto other people and that they're the reason why you're unhappy. I thought that beginning thing that I just happened to find on YouTube was kind of interesting because we do instantaneously make assertions about people. If your brain is polluted with emotion, you will jump to conclusions emotionally. And I would say this is a good indicator for you. Use that. Right now, as you develop your own standard, your own formula, use that understanding that when I have an emotional reaction to somebody, good or bad, I may not be in reality. I need to self-evaluate that before I jump to a conclusion. So then you step back, you start to observe, you see what that person reveals about themselves. And then, like the guy said, at the end of the day, you go back and you realize after talking to this person or interacting with them that they're nothing like you thought they were. Which means what? Which means you jumped to conclusions, you made assertions about a person that you didn't know anything about. Two things to say about that. If you're polluted with your emotions and you don't know how to do this, That's what's going to result. If you develop responsibility and accountability, it gets cleaner for you to then see people as they are immediately. And instantaneously, you will be able to know, I see who you are. Why? Because you've developed responsibility and accountability. Even to the point where you will self-correct. If I thought I knew something about a person, and it turns out to not be true, that's about me. So then I look back and go, okay, so I kind of jumped to that conclusion. All right, so then I need to probably think about that the next time that I'm dealing with that person. It's very interesting. There was a lot of talk this week with these hearings and everything of nominees and confirming people. And one of the things that came up was about science. And this woman, one of these senators, is so stupid. They're saying, do you deny settled science? It's like, well, that's a stupid statement. And somebody should have called her out on it and said, what a dumb thing to say. There is no such thing as settled science. That's not the point of science. Science is ever-changing like what? Like life is ever-changing, like you are ever-changing. You are always going to move to another level, to another understanding. And the more you do that, the easier it gets. So if you start doing, kind of the process that I did where I'm dissecting everything, at some point you stop doing that because you've developed the skill of accountability and responsibility in your life. You've created your own formula for this is the standard that I want to live by. But these people that don't understand science, they don't understand the fundamentals of science like the fundamentals of your formula. How's that for pulling it all together? So as you go through your week, think about this. Think about the times that you look at things or you're interacting with somebody and you kind of jump to a conclusion about a situation or a person. Step back and then ask yourself, was that an emotional response or was that just my instinct? Was that the body telling me, pay attention to this? Because the body will be very subtle and it will not over-exaggerate something. If it's over-exaggerated, that means that's about you. That's about having polluted yourself emotionally. You didn't resolve something, and now you're using whatever that is unresolved in you outside of yourself to try to resolve it. And that's like no bueno, right? I actually was on X earlier this week, and somebody had made a comment about the way, liberals, they always seem to do such and such. And I wrote, and I said, yes, I used to be like them decades ago. And I can attest to this lack of knowledge and cognitive comprehension. I used emotion to manipulate people. And I lacked integrity and I lacked character. The two fundamentals that wind up being created, they're byproducts of responsibility and accountability. And I have endeavored the development of my responsibility and accountability that really absolved me and rid me of the disease that I watch other people engage in. And it's not just liberals. I mean, it's both sides, in that sense. But it's just all people, right? There's a lot of people out there that are very unclean in their interactions in life. And it's because they're dealing with something and then they're thinking that whatever's going on in their exchange with someone is about the other person. And it's never about the other person. I'm going to say that again. It's never about the other person. It's always about you. And this is something that is very critical in your life for you to integrate and to take it in and really digest it and make it a part of you in your understanding of the world. That something that is going on is about you. Whether or not you look at it as good or bad, it doesn't matter. You have to realize that Nope, that's about me. I don't like that, or I do like that, but that's about me. It's not about that person. That person's just doing whatever it is they're doing. Okay, do whatever you want. That's your freak flag fly. But it's about me not liking the freak of the flag. It isn't about them letting their freak flag fly. Wow, that was a lot. If you try to organize the world in order to control it, because you don't want to deal with the issue of not having developed responsibility and accountability, you will not move yourself to a place of having clean interactions with people. And then you will wind up doing the projection rejection throughout your life. Because when you project onto other people, you reject. What are you rejecting? You're rejecting your own responsibility and accountability development. So you got to get clean with that, and you got to own it all and clean all that up, get all the schmutz out of there so that you can live a life that's easy and fun and joyful. And then you just get to sit back and laugh at everything because, to be honest, it's not that serious. It is, but it's not. And one other note that I wrote for myself that I wanted to make sure I mentioned was, you cannot unhear this. Now that you've heard this, this is in your consciousness and it's in your unconsciousness. Your body has heard this, and whether or not you try to go through life and ignore it, it will not matter because it will not ignore you. You can try to ignore it, but it will not ignore you. And that is the end of today. Hey, thanks so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. It was a lot of fun, actually. All the fun links are down below. If you want to follow me on any of that good stuff, that's how you do it. If you want to subscribe to the podcast, that's great. I always appreciate that. If you hit the like button, it actually changes the algorithm, and I don't know, it just kind of moves up. But, it's like, oh, people saw your stuff. I got a thing the other day that said I have over 1,000 people that have, or 1,000 podcasts that have been downloaded. It's like, oh, that's kind of cool. So do all that kind of fun stuff, and I will see you here next week. Let each care for self, and all will be cared for. Make it a great week, and enjoy your life.